So that is a reality of the situation. And my advice for those people is to get involved. Get involved into politics. Learn the system, because there are pathways to become a citizen. There are pathways to permanent residence. You just have to figure them out.
Welcome to the Audate show. And today's guest is Tony Delgado. And in Tony's journey, you're going to learn how he started the Latino Wall Street, as well as when he was 5 years old, his dad got sentenced essentially to life in prison, and how he actually got his dad free out of the prison system due to prison reform, and his journey of starting Latino Wall Street. Let's get started on this episode today. There was a conversation that we had last night. So yesterday in Las Vegas, you traveled into Las Vegas for Funnel Hacking Live. There was a conversation that we were having, and it inspired me to do the show. Actually, you're the reason that I'm here, and all of our guests that came in today are here, because after our conversation, I said, no, we got to record this and share and document what your experience is and what the journey between entrepreneurship and politicians and what you've seen, because you're going to be able to speak to entrepreneurs in a way that, hey, there's a new world out here. There's a different way of looking at things. There's a different way of looking at money. There's a different way of marketing. There's a different way that people operate at a different level. And I'm inspired to see what you've seen and for us to get a glimpse of that.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, those are sometimes the best conversations, right? The ones in the corner, in the hallway, and it's like, oh, wait, we need to record this. So I'm happy to be here.
Yesterday, just for context, I saw Tony Delgado, and I haven't seen him in years. And out of nowhere, I'm just standing up at the Funnel Hacking Live conference here in Las Vegas, held by Russell Brunson. And as I'm standing up in the back of the room, Tony walks right by me, and I'm like, hey, Tony, it's been a while. And then we reconnected, spoke for, 30 or so minutes, and he was sharing me his journey of how he went from being an entrepreneur to being an entrepreneur working with politicians. And I'm excited to bring to you what his thoughts are, what his perspective is of seeing millions of dollars flow in the politician world. And he's going to share with you some insight on today's podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So, take us through your entrepreneur journey so we can establish that credibility and that understanding that you know what we're going through as entrepreneurs, and then take us through your journey of building Latino Wall Street.
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up Section 8. My mom was a single mother. She was working super hard to just keep the lights on. And I remember my first pair of Jordans. I wanted to get like the really good ones, like the ones or the twos or the threes or the retros, right? And the only pair that she could afford to get me was this pair of they were not basketball, they were for boxing. And they were like on clearance. It was like when Michael Jordan started coming out with like golf and all these different weird ones. So they were so thin. They were like little leather boxing, almost like socks. And that was my first pair of Jordans. And my mom, was able to scoop together as much as she needed to get them on sale or whatever it was. But I grew up without my father. My father went to jail. I left the house when I was 2, went to jail when I was 5. And I had no idea that I had a father. I thought that he was working. I thought that he was somewhere else. And then when I was 12 years old, my big brother and my grandfather took me to Puerto Rico, and I'm working out in this shed. We used to run a mile to the top of this shed from my grandfather's house to this small gym. And he starts telling me all these stories about my dad. And he's like, oh, yeah, one time your dad, these cops tried to block the street, and your dad comes up with a big Tommy gun. Cops were so scared of this gun that they reversed their cars. They said, no, go, it's okay, and never mind. And so he keeps telling me all these crazy stories about my dad. And then he finally says, and that's where he is now. He's doing life in jail, and he's never coming home. So that hit me really hard as like a 12-year-old. Before that, I was just a church kid, private school. I was always kind of getting in trouble. I was bouncing between public and private school, kept getting kicked out and re-enrolled into different private schools and public schools. But that hit me really hard. And then there was this song from Biggie Smalls at the time. I think it's like, because I'm a piece of shit, it ain't hard to fucking tell. And I just remember being like 12 or 13, just finding out that like basically my whole life was a lie. My father, who I thought was just a guy who was working and wasn't around because he couldn't find the plane tickets. I find out that he's in jail for life. And it was definitely a perspective shift. And then I got real rebellious, and I had a lot of probably hatred and resentment towards the government, towards the system. I started doing research into all the different prohibition laws. My father was given life in jail for a non-violent drug offense. So he didn't hurt anybody. He didn't shoot anybody. He wasn't even caught with any drugs. Someone else was caught with drugs and said, hey, it was him. He did it. And because of that, he was given life without the possibility of parole. So he was sentenced to die in jail under the Joe Biden crime bills of the early 90s. And it was a really hard time. And I remember fantasizing about like renting a helicopter and trying to get him out and try to dig a tunnel under the jail and everything that you can imagine a young kid would dream about. And then over the years, he tried all these different appeals, all these different things to try to get out of jail. And appeal after appeal, he was just losing. The lawyers took all his money, right? And it looked like there was no hope. It looked like there was no chance of him ever being released. And I got to a point in my life where I just kind of accepted it. It was like my dad was dead in a cell, you know? And then in 2018, President Donald Trump released a law called the First Step Act. So I don't know if you remember when Kim Kardashian and Kanye West went to the White House during the first administration, and Kanye wears the red hat in the White House and it goes viral. Well, it wasn't just about a viral moment. They were going there to pass legislation to put in front of President Donald Trump all these cases, just like my dad, where there were nonviolent drug offenses, where under any other circumstances, they would have been given maybe 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. But because they chose to exercise their rights, they chose to go to trial and lose that trial. And they were given basically the death penalty. They were told to die in jail. And so the first woman that was released was a mom who, I believe her husband or someone was selling drugs and she was in the household. And because of that, all her grandkids had never been able to see her. And she was, basically alive in a coffin. And so she was the first person that got released under President Trump. And then about 6 months before the last administration, my dad filed for release under the First Step Back under Donald Trump, and he was released from jail after 33 years.
Wow. I mean, wow, dude. First and foremost, that is such a journey that you went through from 12 years old. And then now, did you get a chance to see him? How is he doing?
Yeah, no. So it's kind of funny. In order for him to come out, right, it's not just to get out of jail free card. You have to file an application. And, to his credit, he filed a lot of his paperwork in jail. He was like a jailhouse lawyer. So he's sending us all these documents. We're taking the papers and transcribing them, sending them to Fiverr and Upwork and getting people to retype them so that they're formatted properly. And then we helped him file his own paperwork from the inside. And one of the things that you have to do is you have to get family and friends to kind of co-sign for you. If not, you may be released. It's less likely. And then if you are released, you go to a halfway house or something like that. It's not really a good experience. So we co-signed and I said, hey, I'm a successful businessman. I own multiple homes. I own multiple businesses. I will make sure that my dad, if he is released, is not a burden on society. So I write this letter and then, it had been years of us trying to get him out. And I knew about the First Step Act, but again, it's not guaranteed. It's an application process. And so that was one of the reasons why I started to like President Trump when that law had came out, but it hadn't directly affected me until that point, right? Law was passed around 2019, proposed in 18. In 19, they start releasing people. Then in 2020, COVID was a reason. They were releasing a lot of people because of that, because you got guys in there.
They were or they weren't?
They were, yeah, because you got guys in there that are in there for 30, 40 years. They're in their 70s. They're in their 80s. They're on their deathbeds. And it's like they want to spend their last few years with their kids and their grandkids. So up until that point, I didn't believe it. It was like too good to be true. Like, okay, let's file the paperwork. And everyone's like, where's he going to sleep? And I'm just file the paperwork and let's see if the government even lets him out, right? Mm-hmm. And I was very jaded in that way. And then we were hosting our big Latino Wall Street annual conference. We get Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the headliner. And over 1,000 people in Miami. It's this big conference. We do it every year. And then about 2-3 days before the conference, I get a phone call. Hey, this is the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I got this letter here. It says you're going to take care of your dad. Is that still true? It's like, yeah, sure. I'll take care of him. Why? When are you releasing him? Oh, I'll probably release him tomorrow. Like tomorrow? I was like, I'm completely unprepared, right? And then I'm in Atlanta. I'm meeting with some people in the life insurance and financial services space, and I'm with a business partner of mine. We're driving to the airport, and I tell him the good news. I'm like, dude, I just found out that my dad, who I lost when I was 5 years old, is coming home from jail. He was sentenced to life, and it just got overturned because of Trump. And he says, oh, my God, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. I lost my dad, too, when I was 5. He died. And I was like, like any type of resentment or anything that I was holding on to, like wishing it could have been a certain different way or whatever, just disappeared because I'm like, dude, it could be worse, right? Like, yes, I lost my dad when I was 5, but I was able to get him back. And there's so many people that will never get their fathers back because they died or because they don't even know where they are. And so within 24 to 48 hours, my dad's released. Now, mind you, he has not been out in 33 years. Yeah. He doesn't know what an iPhone is.
For sure.
He's never used any of this technology. So he calls me from California. I'm in West Palm Beach, Florida. And he's like, oh, I'm out. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, I'm out. I have this bag full of stuff and they gave me a bus ticket. It's going to take me 3 days to get back. I was like, dude, you're not taking the bus. I was like, whose phone are you using? A security guard. I was like, okay, tell me the address. I'm going to call you this thing called an Uber and you're going to go to the airport and I'm going to buy you a plane ticket. So I put him on a first class flight. We fly him up Palm Beach. I pick him up from the airport in my Maserati and we take him. I was like, hey, are you hungry? He's like, yeah. I was like, okay, but we got to get you out of these clothes. He's still in the freaking giant jumpsuit. And I take him to Nordstrom's. We get him fitted for a suit. And I'm like, yeah, and you have to meet Kennedy tomorrow. So we get him fitted for a suit. I take him for a steak. And within 24 to 48 hours, he's like at my event with Kennedy and all these other celebrities. And so his life has been kind of nonstop ever since.
What has been, I got people who are in the inside right now. And my thought process, even when I think about the people that may have grown up with, spent time with that are in the inside, I do think about the fact that they've been conditioned. And although I'm excited to see them out, I do know that there's a conditioning when you're spending decades in. Like, yeah, you don't know what an iPhone is, but there's also the mentality of staying alive and surviving.
Yeah.
Has there been an element of survival that's still present on the outside for your father?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest things that helped me was actually my wife. So when my father was coming home, I had all this anxiety, all these mixed emotions, right? Didn't know what to think, didn't know what to do. And the first thing my wife told me was, don't have any expectations. If you have all these expectations of him, then you're going to set yourself up for failure and you're just going to be upset, and then like your dad comes out and you're still going to be upset about it. So she gave me the permission to give him all the space that he needs to get himself on the right track, right? It's been 33 years that he's been out of population. So she really said, listen, don't stress him out about getting a job right away. Don't stress him out about doing 100 different things. Give him time to reintegrate. And as my wife, who's someone who she has nothing to do with crime. She's never even smoked weed in her life. She's never done anything wrong. She's like a very goody two-shoes girl. For her to have that much compassion and understanding for my dad's situation and say, listen, he's not my dad, he's your dad. But even I know that he's going to need time to reintegrate, I think was really key and really huge. And, not for nothing, but my dad was basically an attorney, basically a paralegal. He was getting other people out. He was filing paperwork for other people while he's in prison. And so I was like, Dad, you got to get yourself out. But yeah, there's definitely a lot that he has had to adapt to. But he lives with me in a beautiful house on a 1,500-acre golf course. And he got his driver's license now. And he got his email and all this stuff set up. And, we're just taking it one day at a time. He's with his grandkids and he's able to have those experiences, and then eventually we got to meet President Trump and say thank you. So that was actually something that was really cool. We, like I mentioned, we met Kennedy. He spoke at our event. Then we were doing all these things with Kennedy's campaign. And, we couldn't even announce Kennedy until a day before the event for security reasons. So by the time we announced Kennedy, the event's already sold out. So no one came to our conference to see Kennedy. They all came to see us. And Kennedy was like this bonus. Oh, wow, I didn't even know this guy was running for president. And all our raving fans at Latino Wall Street ended up falling in love with Kennedy. Kennedy speaks some Spanish, so he does half of his keynote in Spanish. He talks about going to jail in Puerto Rico, protesting for humanitarian rights. And all of our followers fell in love with Kennedy. And then we start doing these Latino town hall events on Instagram and social media. So we were essentially doing IG lives with Kennedy, IG and TikTok lives with Kennedy. And we were just providing so much value to the campaign. And again, this is kind of our conversation that started this podcast was, there's so many similarities between the political world and the entrepreneurial world. Like at the end of the day, politics is just personal brands. So if you understand personal brands and social media marketing and all of these things, then there's like so much crossover. The only big difference is that the budgets are a lot bigger, right? And Kennedy's campaign ends up coming to us and saying, hey, you guys are doing so great, providing so much value. Would you want to run the Hispanic outreach campaign for Kennedy's presidential run? And so we're like, oh my God, yeah, we would love to do that. So we ended up, both me and my wife were under contract with Kennedy's campaign, and we ran his Hispanic outreach. And then we knew about kind of the Trump partnership potential early on. We thought it might have been a VP, like a Kennedy Trump ticket. And then once the endorsement was made, these startups, these campaigns are like these giant startups. All this money, millions of dollars flow into them, right? but it has an end date, right? And if you don't spend all the money by the day the election is over, either your candidate wins or your candidate loses. So there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of last minute planning. Like you're planning an event within a week or sometimes within a day or 2 days, right? It's just planning, executing. And when Kennedy made the move over to Trump, we started supporting the Trump campaign. We started investigating the Trump campaign. There was mixed feelings in the Kennedy camp initially because you got to think Kennedy's all Democrats. And so people are crying on the Zoom call. I'm on this private Zoom call with Kennedy and like 350 staffers. And the staffers are there crying, oh my God, we really wanted you to win. And then me and my dad attended the Madison Square Garden rally. It was the first Trump rally that I had ever been to. And so you got 100,000 people in New York City, right? Buddy of mine's a military guy. And I was like, all right, come on. You know how to fight, right? Let's walk around New York City with red hats on. So first time I threw on a red hat was there in Madison Square Garden. We're walking around New York City. But to my surprise, instead of people coming up to me and trying to fight me, people are coming up to me, giving me high fives, telling me, oh man, New York really needs a change. The freaking Venezuelan gangs are running around here crazy, taking shit over. We really need Trump. And these are like blacks and Latinos that are coming up to me, random New Yorkers, not people that were there for the rally. And I was like, oh wow, there's actually like a real big cultural shift to see that happening in New York City, right? A Democrat state. So then we go to this rally, the most New York Trump rally ever. You got Giuliani, you have the fire department and all these real hardcore New Yorkers. And then there was the joke that was said about Puerto Rico, the viral joke from the comedian Kill Tony. And you have to understand the context. This joke was said right after the national anthem around 2 p.m. There's probably 30, 40 acts that go on stage. You got Elon Musk, you have Tucker Carlson, you have a bunch of people you've probably never heard of, right? Up until you get to kind of the Elons and these people. Elon and Trump and all these guys, they come on in the evening around 6, 7, 8 p.m. The joke's set at 2 p.m. And the jokes, to me, my conspiracy theory, I put it on my Instagram, I believe it was a setup. The guy comes on stage, he pulls a paper out of his pocket. Every single person is reading off of glass teleprompters. This guy pulls a paper out of his pocket. And he starts saying jokes. It wasn't only the Puerto Rico joke. He starts saying all these jokes that are like not funny. They're like obviously offensive, like obviously trying to get people canceled. And then simultaneously, as these jokes are being said, Kamala Harris is in a Puerto Rican restaurant doing a press conference with her plan for Puerto Rico, with endorsements from J-Lo and Ricky Martin lined up, launching at the exact same time, and a video that was produced in the White House a week earlier of her talking about how she has a plan for Puerto Rico, and she's doing a press conference at the same time. So for me, I don't believe in coincidences. I believe that either someone tipped her off to that joke, or even worse, that joke was a setup and a staged thing, because it's just, there's no such thing as a coincidence that you happen to be doing a Puerto Rican press tour when a Puerto Rican joke is being said. So the joke gets said. I don't like the joke. My dad doesn't like the joke. No one in the audience liked the joke.
Do you recall?
The joke was comparing Puerto Rico to a floating pile of garbage. That was the joke. And the rationale behind it was that Puerto Rico does have a garbage problem. And so basically there's all this garbage in Puerto Rico and there's no place to put it. So, and this is a known thing for years since I was a kid. So there's all these mountains of garbage and they cover them up and they try to make them look like beautiful mountains, but they're actually just mountains of garbage that are sitting in Puerto Rico. And so he said something along the lines of, oh, and there's this floating island of garbage, and I'm not talking about Puerto Rico. And there were also some other weird jokes. Like there was one that was like, hey, where are my Latinos for Trump? And then like the whole crowd like, well, oh yeah, Latinos for Trump, we're here. And then it's like, oh, you see, well, we have an immigration problem. We got to deport these people, right? That was like a little bit funny. But even then, a lot of the jokes were very off color. There was one more about Jewish people, something about them being cheap or picking up a penny or something like very stereotypical. And then there was one about African Americans, and it's like, oh, look at this African American guy. Oh, let's go eat watermelon later. And I was like, dude, none of these jokes are funny. It's like he's intentionally trying to like get canceled. And again, the biggest telltale sign for me is when he pulls the paper out of his pocket.
Rather than reading off the glass
teleprompter. A teleprompter with the jokes that are approved, that the campaign actually approved, right? So I had dual credentials, dual badges, one VIP and one press. So I'm sitting in the press pit when these jokes are being told, and I'm watching all the New York Times, all these reporters writing the hit pieces. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? I'm like in the swamp, right? And then a gentleman comes into the press room and all the journalists are on top of him. I don't know who he is. I take a picture. I send it to my boy from D.C. I'm like, yo, who is this guy? He's like, oh, that's Jason Miller. It's like Trump's number 2 in command. I was like, oh, wow. So I go up to him after, and then I speak to some of my other friends who are insiders. I was like, listen, I need to meet with Trump. I want to talk to him about Puerto Rico. So when's the next meet and greet with Trump? There's a meet and greet with him 24 hours later in Atlanta. So I fly to Atlanta. Me and my wife are the first 2 private citizens to ask Trump to his face, hey, what's up with Puerto Rico? What's up with Latinos? Trump's super, super nice, dude. Oh, my God, I love the Puerto Ricans. I love the Latinos. Are they mad at that joke? Are they really mad? How are we doing with the Latinos? He's like a big kid in a candy store. I'm like, holy shit, this guy doesn't seem like he's in the KKK to me, right? And super, super nice, right? And then we talked to the campaign afterwards, and we're like, you guys need another McDonald's moment, because at that point, it had been 48 hours. The media is not letting go of this Puerto Rico narrative, and it was obvious that they were just going to keep shoving this narrative down everyone's throat from now into the election to try to destroy all the inroads that were made with the Latinos. Because at that point in time, prior to that joke, Latino Wall Street, we have over 1 million people in our email database. We did an internal poll. 82% of people were supporting Trump on a Spanish-speaking poll. 9% independent, only 9% for Kamala. So when I saw that, I'm like, okay, whatever the media is saying, it's 50-50, it's 60-40. No, that's bullshit. Literally, my own poll was 82%.
By the time you did that poll, the joke wasn't heard.
That was before the joke. We re-polled after the joke, and he lost about 10, 15 points. He went down to 67%. So he was still in the lead, but he lost points on the second time when we did the polling after the joke. So we knew it was having a negative impact. My phone's blowing up. People are like, dude, I can't support Trump anymore. Oh,
was that joke in connection to Trump? Was it Trump's rally that joke was made at?
Yeah.
So, and was that a representative of Trump's team?
So that's the thing. The media tried to make it look like this guy was a politician, or like to your point, he was a representative of the campaign. He's literally a comedian. So should he have been vetted better? Yes. Was he the right person for the job? No, absolutely not. But he's technically a comedian. And when the media picked up the story, they're not even putting that he's a comedian. They're saying this representative of Trump said this at a rally, and they're making it look like this guy's like part of the campaign, or it's his vice president, or part of the administration. And here's the thing. I mean, you can say everything that you want about a joke, about something that was said that was off-colored or whatever. Trump gave my dad his life back. So when I look at a joke that wasn't said by Trump, it was said by someone else, and I look at my dad, who was sentenced to life in jail, sentenced to die in jail, released after 33 years because of actual legislation, actual results, actual laws that Trump passed. And I know there's a bunch of other black and brown people that were released because of his actual legislation. Like, one joke is not going to change my mind. That wasn't even said by Trump, that Trump wasn't even in the building when the joke was said. And so at that point, I knew I wanted my dad to meet Trump. So me and my wife met Trump first. And then I'm like, guys, we got to do something crazy, something viral, something to get people to forget about it. And we come up with the idea to have Trump take a picture with the Puerto Rican flag and have my dad meet him. So mind you, at this point, we're like 3 days before the election. It's like do or die. Either Trump's going to win or he's going to lose. And we find out that the next meet and greet was here in Vegas. And I text my dad. My dad's in New York City at the time. I'm like, Dad, you got to come to Vegas and like literally get on a plane 6 a.m. and just meet me in Vegas. Then I'm texting all my friends, I need a Puerto Rican flag. It's like, guys, where do you buy a Puerto Rican flag at midnight? I got my people driving around New York City, driving around Vegas, driving around every single major city, trying to find a Puerto Rican flag. Thankfully, a friend of mine, Tony Delgado, lives here in Vegas, has a friend who has a Puerto Rican flag in their porch, and literally gets me a Puerto Rican flag from the porch of somebody and brings it to the rally. And we meet with Trump for a second time. I introduce him to my dad this time. And my dad starts telling them the story. And then, you know, the Secret Service, they're very pushy at these meet and greets. You know, there's a long line to meet them. You got Congress people, senators, all sorts of donors, all sorts of people on these big lines. And so, you know, they're trying to move the line along. And my dad's telling the story, and the Secret Service is like, no, wait, like, come on, let's go. And Trump tells them, no, wait, I need to hear this story. And so Trump tells them to wait. And so me and my dad tell Trump the story. It's like, oh my God, you got to tell the story to everybody. We take the picture with the Puerto Rican flag, right? And then we post it up on Team Trump's page. Team Trump shares it out to 5 million followers. Kimberly Guilfoyle, who's Trump's Puerto Rican daughter-in-law, shares that out to all her millions of followers. The official Latinos for Trump Coalition shares it out. And then the day of the election, my wife gets booked on Univision's Despierta America, which is like Good Morning America for Latinos. So every single Latino in the whole country, when they turn on their TV, they see my wife speaking in Spanish, telling them why she's supporting Trump, and with the picture with me, Trump, and the Puerto Rican flag behind her, and explaining, the reasons. And one of the big reasons was war. We don't want to see our kids going to war. We had peace up until Biden took office. As soon as Biden took office, you had all these wars breaking out. Now, we could argue about whose fault the war is, but the fact of the matter is, whether you love him or hate him, Trump is very crazy. And when you have someone who's crazy and strong, you're not going to want to start a war because you don't know what that man's capable of. He's like the bully in the room, but there's something that Ronald Reagan coined. There's a term called peace through strength. So my opinion is that Joe Biden was so weak, his withdrawal from Afghanistan, right? Leaving all these weapons behind, all this crazy stuff. He showed so much weakness that the world started going crazy. They're like, hey, it's like when the parents aren't around and the kids go crazy, All these wars are breaking out because it's like, oh, this guy's not going to do nothing. This guy can't even tie his shoes. So peace and prosperity was a big thing for us. The economy was a big thing for us. And then safety and security in our own communities. It's a misnomer that just because you're Hispanic, you want illegal immigration, right? Like Latinos leave Latin America because we're trying to get away from the cartels. We're trying to get away from the crime and the corruption and all the bad things that are happening in our communities. We don't want these people coming here that are coming across the border illegally, bringing drugs, bringing guns, doing human trafficking. The only reason to go across the border illegally, for the most part, is because you have something to hide or you're trying to do something wrong, right? There is a legal immigration process. There is a legal asylum process that people can follow and are supposed to follow. So when you go around the border, and here's another misnomer, to assume that every single person that's crossing that border is Latino is racist. You have people from China crossing that border. You have people from Saudi Arabia. You have people from Africa. You have people from Europe. You have people from all around the world that are crossing that border illegally because you're leaving it wide open. Think about it like a nightclub. If you have a nightclub and you have no bouncer, no metal detectors, you don't check ID, what are you going to have? You're going to have a bunch of people bringing in drugs, bringing in guns, and being in there underage and undocumented. And so that's the same exact thing on a larger scale that happened to our nation over the past 4 years. And then you look at Democrat-run cities that were so-called sanctuary cities. And, for example, Mayor Eric Adams, now he's walking it back and saying, whoa, never mind, we can't be a sanctuary anymore. Because that sounds good until you have cartels who are coming in and they're not playing by the normal rules. They're not playing by the rules of the United States. They're running stuff like they did back home. And you're seeing them go into places like Denver, taking over apartment buildings and saying, yeah, no, we're going to set up shop and we're going to run this the way we did back home. And nobody knows the true violence of the cartels as good as actual Latinos, actual hardworking. You got 50 million hardworking Hispanic Americans who are American citizens who live in this country. We pay our taxes. We go to work every day. And we come here for the American dream, not the San Francisco nightmare. So there's nobody in this country that wants a safe and secure border more than hardworking, honest Latinos.
What is the experience for the Latino community? Because you're a representative of the Latino community. What is the experience of the Latino community when Trump is talking about Latin America, talking about the border, talking about get him out of here, and then you're running Latino Wall Street?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, it is a very hard situation and there are a lot of really hard conversations that have to be had, right? But again, when you look at the majority of Latinos, when you look at the 50 million Hispanic American citizens who live in this country, who came here legally, who paid lawyers, who are on a wait list, right? My wife wasn't born here. My wife was born in Peru. She was born as a Peruvian citizen. And then she came here and went to NYU, got a scholarship, and then had to hire lawyers and go through a whole process and become naturalized, right? And it's a process, and she's very proud of that process. She's proud that she became an American citizen, right? So to just assume that every single person who comes here illegally is Latino is not accurate, right? Because we have people from all around the world that come here and try to get into that border. They'll fly into Guatemala. They'll fly into Ecuador. They'll come up and they'll go into the border illegally because we knew that it was open. And so I think that's the one misnomer, right? And then the second misnomer is that illegal status is good for Latinos. When you come here and you're not legal, you're going to be taken advantage of, right? On the low side, you could just be exploited for labor, right? You're gonna have lower wages, right? You're gonna have less access to housing, right? Because people know that you're here undocumented. But the worst part is that 2 out of 3 women who cross the border illegally end up getting raped. The kids that are coming across the border end up getting trafficked. And what ends up happening is instead of the border being ran by the American government, who we are humane, we're the biggest nation in the world that accepts immigrants. Other countries do not accept immigrants. If you go to another country, if you go to Colombia, if you go to Europe, you go to any of these other countries and you try to become a citizen, it's hard. They don't have open borders. If you look at statistically, we accept the most immigrants into our country legally, right? And we have a very humane process. We really do. But when people come across the border illegally, they're not going through the American system. It is actually the cartels who are running the illegal border crossings. So what happens is a woman saves up maybe $5,000 or less. Sometimes it's $3,000, maybe it's a few hundred. And they pay someone, they call them coyotes. They pay members of the cartel. And they say, hey, you pay me and I'm going to get you across the border. I know exactly where the places are, where the border patrol's not looking, and you're going to pay me and I'm going to cross you across the border. And what ends up happening is 2 out of 3 women end up getting raped, kids end up getting sex trafficked, and there's all sorts of weird, really bad, evil things that are happening at that border. And so that's why when Glenn Parada and Bianca Garcia and Mayra Flores and a lot of these other Latino leaders from the Latino for Trump coalition went down to the border and they started documenting this, we were traumatized. You go to the border and you see condoms on the side of the border. You see little kids' passports and all these things that are little kids' clothing, because what ends up happening is instead of them going through and having the United States take you through a normal immigration process that is safe, that is legal, you have the cartels that are running this black market human trafficking organization. And so the last thing that I want any Latino to do is to try to cross the border illegally because it's not safe.
For the people in the last, I don't know how many decades, but for the people that have crossed the border illegally, they're undocumented, they're Latino, or they're maybe Asian or any other people who are coming through the border, and they're fleeing. It's not that they're doing anything illegal. It's not that they're part of the cartel. They're fleeing to create something better for their lives. What do you have to say for those people?
Well, I mean, there's 2 things. If people have legitimate asylum claims, right? We have certain countries where there is an asylum process. And so if you're coming from Venezuela and you're being politically persecuted, which happened recently, right? They stole the election in Venezuela. And anyone who said that they supported the opposition, they're putting them in jail, they're persecuting them, right? Same thing happens in Cuba. There is a legal asylum process that you can go through, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, there's a fine line between asylum and between complete trespassing, right? So if you're here and you're completely undocumented, what the Trump administration has said is they're giving everyone a chance to go back, go to where your country of origin, or a country that has a treaty that will accept you, and then file for your asylum and come back in the right way. You know what I mean? You can't just go and trespass. It's like if someone came into your house and you open the door and they're sitting in your sofa.
Yeah,
right.
But Tony, you're talking about kids who are coming through. The coyotes are bringing them in, and so on and so forth. I'm thinking of when you were 5 years old. I'm thinking of the kid who's 5 years old, 2 years old, that comes over. And the ones that's not sex trafficked, the ones that's not human trafficked, the ones that actually made it through, let's say that they're here for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah.
And do you expect them to go back after establishing businesses in the United States, getting degrees in the United States, buying real estate in the United States, establishing their entire life? They came here at 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old. Do you expect them to go back?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a very hard decision to make. Now, the legal fact of the matter is there are multiple pathways to citizenship. There are multiple pathways to residency, right? You talked about starting businesses. There are investor visas that a lot of my friends are here on investor visas. So there are ways to come into the country legally. And I think, just like anything else, you have to do things according to the law. We have to have law and order in our country. When I grew up, one of the first things I did was buy a car, and I didn't have a driver's license because I thought I was too smart. And I thought, you know what? I don't need a driver's license. I was born, God gave me the right to drive, so I'm just going to drive without a driver's license. And for years, I would just drive, and then I would get stopped, I would get a ticket, and they would take my car. And I would have to keep butting heads with the law until I realized, oh, wait, I think if I'm going to drive a car, I actually do need a driver's license at a certain point. So it's a similar thing. I mean, you can't come into a country, not respect the laws, and then when there's a consequence, that's honestly, it's a very hard fact of reality. No other country has as many ways to get into the country legally as the United States. So I implore people to look into the various ways of coming here, whether it's through political asylum, whether it's through investor visas, like what you said, whether it's through work visas, right? But yeah, if you're working here, you're paying your taxes, you're a productive member of society. The Trump campaign has made it very clear that that's not their priority. What ended up happening in the Biden administration was you had a program called Catch and Release. So previously, when I was a kid growing up, I grew up in a Spanish neighborhood, and this was a known thing. If you were here and you were not a U.S. citizen, you were here under any other status, right, and you got in trouble, you went to jail, it was automatic deportation. It's like, okay, you're not a citizen yet, and now you've broken one of our laws, now you have to get deported, right? It's kind of common sense, right? You go and you rob a liquor store, you do something crazy, you're wilding out, you join a gang, right? A lot of my friends were Latin kings and all these different things. And so if you go and you break the law and you're not a citizen, it was automatic deportation. Biden came and changed that law. And they did what's called catch and release. And they started releasing people on bail back into the community. And that's when you have American citizens who are now dying. They're getting killed by cartel members. The cartel members are bailing out and going right back into the same communities. And there's countless stories. I've met a lot of these women on the campaign trail where their sons are being killed by cartel members who are let back into the society instead of getting deported the way they should be. So the Trump campaign has made it very clear that they're not focused on deporting children. They're not focused on deporting grandmas. They're focused right now on deporting people who violated the law. So that's their number one priority. But again, we have to circle back that crossing the border illegally, it is violating the law. It's just like when I drove without a driver's license when I was a kid. I can say, hey, I have the right to drive. Hey, it should be a human right that everyone should drive. But that's not the reality of the world that we live in. And you know what? Any other country in the world, if you outstay your visa, if you go, we take it for granted that we have a blue passport and that we're accepted into any other major country, right? Like almost every other major country, you don't even have to tell them you're coming. You can just book a plane ticket and you get instant access, right? Other people's passports, it doesn't work that way, right? Like my wife always talks about this. The first half of her life, she had a Peruvian passport. She had to ask permission months in advance, if not years in advance, just to go on a vacation. And sometimes the other country can say no, right? But if you're given travel access to any other country, even Peru, even Mexico, right? And you have a contract, and your contract says you're supposed to be here for 3 months on a travel visa. You outstay your welcome. That's an automatic deportation from any other country. No other country operates this way, that it's like, oh, okay, you outstood your travel visa. You know what? That's fine. You can apply for a political asylum. You know what? That's fine. We're going to have this other work visa. We're going to have the DACA program. There's so many programs. There's so many ways to come and do it the right way. So I just implore that if anyone wants to be in this country, figure out the way to do it the right way.
What does Latino Wall Street support? So I understand that there's financial aspects of Latino Wall Street to educate. However, to support people to get naturalized, to support people in their journey of naturalization, how does Latino Wall Street support or advocate or give education to for those individuals?
Yeah, definitely.
Outside of the finances.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I think I mentioned this earlier, but there are investor visas. So anyone who...
But you have to be a citizen of that country and then apply to come in.
Yeah, of course.
I'm talking about, let's say, because when I lived in Los Angeles and I would be around Los Angeles, there were Mexicans, there were people in other Latin descent that weren't there legally.
Yeah.
Or they were undocumented. And for those people who successfully created something here in the United States, they're not doing anything illegal. They live down the street. They're giving people jobs. They're educating themselves. They're educating others. They may have came in at 2 years old, or at 1 year old, or at 3 years old. And I remember seeing that a lot in LA when I lived in Los Angeles. Yeah. Today I live in Las Vegas, but I remember seeing that a lot in LA. How can the Latino Wall Street community support those individuals with their journey of being naturalized?
Yeah, definitely. So
is there value for them to be part of Latino Wall Street?
No, yeah, of course. I mean, here's the thing. We deal with some of the most wealthy Latinos all around the world. And so we've seen it firsthand. We've seen people that they come from Venezuela, they come from Argentina, and they're here and they're frustrated because they're like, hey, I own 5 businesses, I own 10 businesses. I've invested so much into the United States and I'm still on a waiting list to actually have a full-time residence. And that's the reality for all sorts of investors all around the world. They come to the United States, like to your point, they create businesses or they bring businesses with them and they provide value, but they still have to be on a list, right? And they still have to wait their turn. So that is a reality of the situation. And my advice for those people is to get involved. Get involved into politics. Learn the system because there are pathways to become a citizen. There are pathways to permanent residence. You just have to figure them out.
Okay. And primarily, what's the mission of Latino Wall Street?
So we actually took inspiration from Black Wall Street. So Black Wall Street was a community of African Americans over 100 years ago in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it wasn't just about finance. It was African Americans coming together, doing business with each other, learning from each other, and creating wealth and abundance in their community. And Latino Wall Street, we have a very similar mission. It's Latinos coming together to do business with each other, to learn from each other, and to chase the American dream. And a big part of that is finance, right? In school, they don't teach us about money. They don't teach you about a check. They don't teach you how to write a check, about an interest rate, about a mortgage, right? There's all these things about the stock market. There's all these things that get left out of the traditional education system. Now, I was very blessed that in the 5th grade, I had a math teacher who took it upon himself to teach us about buying Amazon stocks when they were 50 cents a share. But that wasn't in the curriculum, right? He went off script and he said, I'm going to add this to the math curriculum. And I think we need more of that. I think we need our kids to get involved in finance at an earlier age. When it comes to investing, one of the biggest assets that you have besides money is time. So the earlier that people can start investing and planting those seeds for their future, the better that they're going to be set up for success in the long term.
Tony, I remember seeing you online primarily with your entrepreneurial endeavors, right? So I'm seeing your funnels, I'm seeing your events, I'm seeing your campaigns, I'm seeing your courses that you're selling, I'm seeing your products, I'm seeing Disrupt Magazine and your different products that you're promoting. And then I don't talk to you for a year or two, and then next thing you know, I see you with Trump, I see you with Kennedy, I see you at Mar-a-Lago and so forth. At what point did the transition take into really get into politics? Did it have something to do with your dad?
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely my dad had a lot to do with it. We just kind of felt grateful. And I felt like Trump gave me the biggest gift that no one else could give me, which was to give me my dad back. It was the one thing I couldn't buy. Didn't matter how much money I had. Didn't matter how successful I was. There was no other way to actually get my dad back. So for me, it was just like kind of karma and gratitude. And it was like Trump helped us when we needed it. So the least I could do is help him when he needed it during the election, right? It wasn't about, if my dad would have came out like today, I don't know if we would have been so gung-ho, oh my God, right? We love Trump. But it was like Trump needed us. We needed him to get my dad out. And then Trump needed us in this election a week before the election when there was a bad joke about Puerto Rico, right? And so if you read the post on my Instagram, I have it pinned. And I broke down, like, Trump gave me my dad back. He gave me my family back, right? So there's not like a bad joke that's gonna make me go against him when he was actually there when I needed him. As far as like the transition, I guess from Disrupt to Latino Wall Street, when we came down to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, we had a mission to impact the 3 million people that lived on the island. And we saw that the difference between the people that got hit the worst were the people with no money and no resource, right? You either had FU money or you had JetBlue money. You either had enough money that you can get on a private plane and leave, or at least you have enough money to get on a commercial flight and leave. And it was the people that had no money, no resources, that they're stuck. They don't have water. They don't have electricity. They don't have money to rebuild. And so that's when we started hosting seminars in Puerto Rico. And that evolved into Latino Wall Street, what we do today. And then our mission, when me and my wife got married, our mission expanded from the 3 million people in Puerto Rico to the 400 million Latinos all around the world. And there's a joke that I always say, if you make enough money, you'll go from a Democrat to a Republican. But it's the truth, because the big thing that I always believed, regardless of politics, was in personal responsibility, right? Like when Trump went down to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, he was criticized for distributing supplies because he threw a piece of paper towel in the audience because he was frustrated. Now, I went back after this joke was said most recently, and I rewatched the footage, and I came to tears because there's an hour of footage of him handing supplies out, of him taking selfies with people in Puerto Rico, of him actually going to help in the middle of a catastrophe, and they took a 1 second clip, which the media loves to do, and they made a whole nation hate a man who was literally trying to help. And I just felt like, oh my God, that could be me. That could be you. And there's a quote from Brock Pierce. He's a crypto billionaire friend of mine from Puerto Rico. He's been criticized a lot in Puerto Rico. He's done a lot of humanitarian work that he doesn't even talk about down there. Like, he's just helping people, and he's not even talking about it because anything he does, he gets criticized, right? And he told me this quote. He said, "No good deed will go unpunished." When you stand up and you say, hey, guys, I'm here to help, that's when you get nailed to a cross like Jesus, and that's when you get crucified. When anyone stands up and they have a voice and they say, hey, I'm here to help, what the media and what the mob does is they will always say you didn't help enough. Great, you helped, but you didn't help enough. But what about all the other people who didn't do shit? What about Biden, who didn't do shit when Hurricane Irma happened years later, right? What about all the other hurricanes that happened and all the other presidents that none of the other presidents went to Puerto Rico when there was a national disaster? Not only did Trump go and get his hands dirty, he gave $90 billion to the island. $90 billion. I don't know about you, but if somebody gives me $90 billion, I'm not going to think that they're racist or that they hate Puerto Rico if they literally signed a check for $90 billion, right? And the fact of the matter is, it goes back to this quote, no good deed will go unpunished. When you take your head out of the sand and you say you want to help, a lot of times the question is going to be, why didn't you help more? Why wasn't it 95 billion? Why wasn't it 100 billion, right? And the fact of the matter is, that could have been me. That could have been you. That could have been anyone who was taken out of context. And so I rewatched all this footage, and I was in tears, and I was like, oh my God, the media made me hate a man who was actually trying to help the island, and who actually still is, right? He still is working on partnerships with Puerto Rico. He still is working on reforms in Puerto Rico. He still is working on, right now there's legislation being passed to abolish the Jones Act, which is an overtaxation that's been happening in Puerto Rico for over 100 years. And the one thing that I say to all my constituents in Puerto Rico is, if you ever wanted to have some major drastic change happen with anything with American politics, the next 4 years is the time to do it, right? Trump is not politics as usual. He's breaking all the rules. So if you have a cause or you have something drastic that you want to change in the world of politics, we've never had someone this disruptive, especially on his second term that he doesn't even need to worry about re-election. We've never had someone this disruptive who's this willing to change. Just the way he changed the law with the First Step Act to give people who were doing life in jail a second chance at life, something that Obama couldn't do, something that no other Democrat, no other Republican, no one else had the balls to do criminal justice reform the way that Trump did it. Those same types of drastic, disruptive measures can be applied to whatever it is that's important to you. And Trump's the type of guy that he has Democrats and Republicans working in his administration. He's not a partisan guy. So if you have something crazy, a crazy idea, this is the administration to bring it to get things done.
Wow. So powerful, man. How can people learn more about you and learn about Latino Wall Street and what you and your wife are creating?
You can follow me on Instagram at Tony Delgado. You can follow us at Latino Wall Street and go to latinowallstreet.com.
And then when they get to Latino Wall Street, what value can they receive as a recipient of going to the site and then joining and being part of your community?
Yeah, so we have a free newsletter. It goes out every single day. We talk about the stock market, investing, and the economy. And obviously politics touches on the economy, but we don't talk about politics unless it relates to the economy. And then we have a big annual conference every single year in Miami, the Latino Wall Street Awards. So yeah, check out for that, June 28th, 29th.
Hey, brother, thank you so much for being on the episode.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man.
Once again, check out Tony Delgado, check out his social media, check out Latino Wall Street. and decide to invest in yourself and your knowledge to grow and elevate to the next level. I'll see you on the next episode.